The next team is the Phoenix Suns. So I went on the Timeline podcast, one of my favorite NBA podcasts, and they predominantly cover the Phoenix Suns. We did a whole trade episode, basically half an episode for them. So check that out with little old me on it. I'll go through I had the same names listed. I was actually on the same page as them, but I have a trade to run by you that they proposed to me that I couldn't figure out what I would do with. But so some of the names I have for them, Kenrich Williams. I know that's good. Hey, the Thunder should trade for Kenrich Williams. They have him, but I just feel like they should trade for him.
I agree. Right there with you.
Kenrich Williams, Justin Holiday is actually on this list because I think that they do need like another wing, and he would be great. They could also, Torrey Craig is on the list. They never should have let him leave, in my opinion. He was great for them. People have floated. I didn't have him on my list. They floated the idea of Karis LeVert here. He's too much of a question mark if you need to displace him from the ball for me to say that because they would have to give up real assets to get him. Eric Gordon would be wildly intriguing for this team because they could use someone on the perimeter who puts more pressure on the rim. The name that I have Larry Nance Jr. for them if he becomes available. I've been trying to get Larry Nance Jr. to Phoenix for like 3 or 4 years now. I'm not as crazy about it given how well JaVale McGee has played and even Frank Kaminsky when he's healthy, because I think you do need to give you need to give Nance some time at the 5, and those minutes just don't seem as available when McGee specifically is playing so well. They suggested Harrison Barnes, and I think he's a great fit for them. The trade that they came up with, the framework was Saric, Smith, Cam Johnson, and a first for Harrison Barnes, and then you needed a cheap player from Sacramento so the roster spot math isn't as ridiculous. I ultimately said no for the Suns. If I was the Kings, I would jump. I would jump at the first allowable pick, which would be 2024 for Phoenix as of right now. I'll double check that, but I have it marked down as 2024. I would jump at that if I'm Sacramento. For Phoenix, as a pure asset play, I get it. However, in my mind, I think there's a move out there that would give you 40 to 60% of the idea of Harrison Barnes to where you don't have to give up that type of asset equity. That's where I ultimately landed.
My initial reaction is that I would do it if and only if I can heavily protect that first round pick, because I don't know what the post Chris Paul era is going to look like. And we're probably entering that by the 2024 draft. So if you tell me that I can put like a top 22 protection, and if it doesn't convey, it converts to 2 second round picks, then I'm in. But there's a little too much uncertainty that far out in the future for me to want to make a move, because as you mentioned, you can replicate what Barnes brings at a smaller scale for a cheaper price. So if you're letting me put those protections in, sure, I'm upgrading from Cam Johnson to Harrison Barnes, because that's ultimately how I'm viewing this.
The two other names that I had for them, and if you're willing to give up Cam Johnson, was my thought here, and maybe the actual package is not as stark for either of these guys as right now for this player I'm about to name. It definitely shouldn't be. Derek White, if you view him as a defensive wing, would intrigue me for this team. I'm not giving up Cam Johnson in a first for him, though. His contract, I still think, is iffy. And then Gary Trent Jr. was the other one I had. If the Raptors just decide to say, hey, we're not moving OG or Scotty Barnes, I don't think you can move Van Fleet. He would have been on so many lists if they were open to moving Van Fleet. So that was intriguing to me. I wonder because Trent has been so good defensively this year, and I do think he gives you an element of on-ball offense, even though he's mostly just a great floor spacer. He's shooting, I think, better than 50% on pull-up twos this year, and that kind of fits the Devin Booker, Chris Paul motif.
I think I'm leaning more towards acquiring Eric Gordon than Gary Trent Jr. just because of the price points that it would take to get them.
So were you doing first allowable first to get Eric Gordon? Because that's essentially, I'm not giving up Cam Johnson for Eric Gordon.
Yes, with those protections again in place.
What's the protection?
Like a top 20 kind of thing.
I think it would have to be lottery.
Then I'm probably still fine with that, because I know that he's going to bring an immediate assist to this team.
Where I'm coming from, because in that scenario, the only asset that team is getting is the pick, because Saric is good, but he's probably out for the year. And then Smith is, unless you really think that Phoenix has fucked him up and he's going to be a low-key star for you, that's where I think you run into the protection problems. But I could get on board with that. And I think that's why you wouldn't do if that's available. I know Harrison Barnes fills a much different role on defense than an Eric Gordon, but if that type of move is available to where you don't have to give up Cam Johnson, that's why you don't make the Harrison Barnes deal, in my book.
Right.